coming tonight. It's great to have you with us here in Lafayette and Contra Costa County. This event is being sponsored by the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center, which is based here at the Lutheran Church, Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Lafayette. We have our office here and we have various events here. And I would like to thank and recognize Interim Pastor Scott Sorensen, who's at the back there, for this is a really nice facility, and they've got a number of organizations that are community related, like the Peace Center, that are not especially religious. But we're housed here, we have offices here, and we are happy to be associated with the Lutheran Church here. The Peace Center has been around since 1969. It began during the Vietnam War, and it's continued ever since. We've been speaking out about the ongoing wars, the wars in Central America in the 1980s, the war in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, the Afghanistan, Iraq. So the Peace Center has been doing the best thing it can to educate the community and to be on the streets as well. So if you support that kind of thing, I definitely encourage you to sign up, join the Peace Center, and we would love to have you work with us. We have an activist alert that comes out pretty much every Monday, and that talks about events and things that are happening all over the Bay Area. Our acting director, Margaret O'Clair, does tremendous work putting that together, and so we're really happy to associate with other groups in the Bay Area. Tonight's event is co-sponsored or is being supported by the Voices for Justice in Palestine, which is a club based in Rossmore. We've had support from Jewish Voice for Peace. And it's really wonderful to see so many friends here and so many new faces as well. That is wonderful to see. We recognize that some of the new faces are coming tonight because it's really special. What an opportunity to hear Reverend Munther Isaac. And the tour around North America is being organized by Friends of Sabeel North America. Sabeel is a Christian organization, a Palestinian organization. And just to say a few words about the tour, which I think is a little bit interesting in this tour, and to introduce Reverend Munther, we've got Jesse Wheeler. He's the Executive Administrator of Friends of Sabeel North America. He was a project manager in Lebanon for 7 years, and we're happy to have him with us. So please come up, join us here, Jesse.
Good evening. It's great to see so many people here. I am deeply honored to be able to introduce Reverend Munther Isaac, and we're deeply honored that we have been able, that he said yes to our proposal of a tour. First and foremost. So, Friends of Sabeel North America, we are a Christian Voice for Palestine. We're an organization pursuing justice and peace in the Holy Land through education, through advocacy, and through nonviolent action. And we promote the vision of Sabeel Jerusalem, which is an ecumenical liberation theology movement founded by Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land. And we join our sister chapters around the world in advocating for liberation, for justice, for the Palestinians. And I'm deeply honored to be able to introduce Reverend Munther. This has been on a whirlwind tour across the U.S. He flew in to Pittsburgh, immediately jumped over to Chicago, up to Minneapolis, down to Southern California, is now joining us here in Northern California.
Praise God.
and tomorrow flies back out to New Jersey and New York. Another trip down to Atlanta, and then he has some vacation time. That's all his own, and he won't tell us where he's going, what he's doing. He doesn't want us to book him more gigs. So Reverend Munther, he is a Palestinian Christian pastor and theologian. He pastors the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem and the Lutheran Church in Beit Sahor. He's also the academic dean of Bethlehem Bible College and the director of the influential Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. During this genocide in Gaza, Munther gained global attention for his sermon, Christ Under the Rubble, which was heard by tens of millions of people and subsequently quoted in South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. He has appeared on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, and others. He's passionate about issues related to Palestinian theology and Palestinian justice. He speaks locally and internationally, published numerous articles, and he's the author of The Other Side of the Wall, From Land to Lands, From Eden to the Renewed Earth, in Arabic, An Introduction to Palestinian Theology, a commentary on the book of Daniel, and more recently, in Arabic, a book on women's ordination in the church. He is involved in many reconciliation and interfaith forums, and also a board member of Kairos Palestine. He originally studied civil engineering in Birzeit University, then obtained a master's in biblical studies from Westminster Theological Seminary, and then a PhD from the Oxford Center for Mission Studies. Munther is married to Rudania, an architect, and together they have two boys, Karam and Zaid, who are together exploring the city with my wife and kids. So, I introduced a man who actually needs no introduction, so I just wasted your time. Apologies. Reverend.
Good evening, and I would like to begin by thanking Friends of Sabil for organizing and sponsoring this tour. I know there are so many details. You've heard about the different locations I've been and I'm going to. What you don't know is how much work was done to arrange all the details and multiple speaking engagement in each detail. So thank you for the Friends of Sabil. Thank you definitely for Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center for co-sponsoring this event, and for our Savior's Lutheran Church for hosting us today, and everyone who put this program together. I'm really grateful, and I don't take this opportunity for granted, knowing that not many people would open their space for a Palestinian voice today, as we have witnessed even in this very same tour, trying to put programs in different locations. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." We gather here in our thirst and hunger for righteousness and justice, praying that we will be satisfied and that our efforts will not be in vain. And we gather here with that promise in mind, blessed are those who mourn, thinking of the mourners in Gaza. It has been way too long, and we pray that they will be comforted. As much as I'm grateful and happy to be here, I wish I was here in different circumstances. I wish I didn't have to give the sermon, Christ Under the Rubble. I wish there was no genocide, and I'm broken. We are, as Palestinians, broken that we're still advocating for a ceasefire. It is so hard, so traumatizing. The idea that we've been month after month writing, pleading, even speaking. I've traveled many times just to talk about this. And it seems it's not that we're pleading for a ceasefire. We're pleading for the world to humanize the people of Gaza. To see them as fully human. Because let's be honest, We live in a day in which a genocide has been normalized. People are watching day after day what's happening in Gaza. Just 2 days ago, as I was speaking in Pasadena, and my phone rings, and I look after the talk, breaking news, 100 people killed in one strike in the middle of the night while waking up for morning prayers. How many more need to be killed before the world decides enough is enough? Is the question we're asking. How many families need to lose everything? How many child do we need to pull from under the rubble? How many more pictures do we need to share as Palestinians for the world to say enough is enough? Are we less humans? Is the question we keep asking over and over this genocide. And this is the genocide, maybe the first time in which the whole world is watching. It's not as if the horrors will be discovered after the genocide. We're all watching. And in fact, it's both the victims and those committing the genocide are broadcasting its life to us to see. And we're still deliberating whether it's a genocide or not. No one can claim that they did not know. No one can claim that they did not really know the extent of horrors that exist in Gaza, where people are literally dying from starvation. And the tragedy is that it seems we're still far from the end. We cannot stop though. We cannot stop talking about Gaza. And I know it's hard, month after month, it's been 10 months. And I know that many of us have grown weary and tired from sharing and demonstrating, but we cannot stop demonstrating. We cannot and should not stop talking about Gaza. You know why? Because it's our collective humanity that is at stake. If the world in general is okay with the idea of children being killed on such a magnitude, and we're silent about it, something is wrong with our humanity. So we shouldn't be silent, not just for Gaza, believe me, but for the sake of our humanity. And also because we owe it to the people of Gaza, who've shown us so much integrity and courage in the last 10 months, and even beyond that, throughout the siege. We owe it to their sacrifices that we do not stop talking about Gaza until justice is served. And by the way, it's not just ceasefire that we're calling for. It's accountability for those who committed war crimes. This is justice.
Yes.
So we cannot stop, and that's why I'm here. And I'm here with a message. A message precisely to the American church, but beyond that. Beginning with the first point is that, and we will continue to repeat this over and over, this war did not start on October 7th. We need to address the root causes of all of this. And I used to think, yes, it began with 1948, 76 years of oppression, ethnic cleansing, but believe me, it's even beyond that. A friend of mine from Gaza, a theologian, his name is Yusuf Khouri, said this genocide started with the phrase, a land without people. Yes. This is when we were erased. This was when we were not considered fully human. The colonizers thought, we can give their land to someone else. They looked at our land, they saw people, but to them it was empty because we were people of less worth. Not to God, but to them. This is when it started. Do I need to remind you that Israel is a settler colonial entity? I hope I'm not saying anything controversial here. This is where it all started. And I can't understand how the media, and let me be clear, many church leaders repeated the argument that this war started on October 7th. Isolated October 7th as an isolated event, as if, you know, Palestinians woke up and decided to murder Jews. Why aren't the world talking? Why aren't we talking about 76 years of oppression? 76 years of ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism. I'm still shocked that one of the things, again, when you watch how the media, and again churches, in their statements, talk about this war, very little, if anything, is mentioned about the fact that 80% of the people of Gaza are Nakba survivors, refugees from 1948. Why isn't anybody talking about it? I mean, Israel was literally established on the ruins of the towns and villages of the people of Gaza. Yet somehow this is not mentioned in the coverage of the war. And it's only been 76 years. Friends, these people have the keys to their homes, and they're denied the right to return to their homes. Yet we're being lectured and taught that Jews around the world, because they were somehow in the land thousands of years ago, or because God promised the land to Abraham, they are entitled to the same land. Think of that logic. We're denied the right to return to our homes, of which we hold the keys, while being told that a Jew born in Brooklyn have the right to go and live in those homes. Yet no one is talking about this. Everyone is fixated on that particular day. Why is the international community still silent about the breaking of international law over and over and over again? Why isn't anybody talking about apartheid in Palestine? It's a question that I still honestly baffles me. Human rights organizations, legal experts have documented and numerous reports proving and showing by detail this is apartheid. Yet the same churches who lecture us on human rights and the international law ignore those reports. And it seems as if there is a footnote that we've missed somehow about the international law and human rights, with the exception of Palestinians. As if it does not apply on us. This is the question we're asking now. And that's why I said in December, and I'll say now, I never ever want a European or an American to lecture us on the international law or human rights anymore. The reports are clear. The reports about apartheid are clear. Whether it's Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International, whether it's the Israeli organizations like B'Tselem and Yesh Din. And by the way, before that, Palestinian lawyers and experts have proved that it is apartheid. No one listens to Palestinians because of prejudice. But now at least you have the other reports. Why are you silent? Why are you still relating to Israel as a normal state? And shoving it in our face, the only democracy in the Middle East. Do you know how insulting to us this is as Palestinians living under apartheid when you take about this very same entity as the only democracy in the Middle East? Israel is committing apartheid and Netanyahu is celebrated in the Congress. Where were the faith leaders to protest this? I'm grateful for the increasing number of congressmen and women who said no, not in our name, and who boycotted the event. But we need more faith leaders to step up and say, this is apartheid, we cannot normalize the relationship with apartheid. Why isn't anybody talking about the siege? 16 years. A siege in which the amounts of calories were calculated that entered Gaza. Can you think of something more dehumanizing? And the world was okay with it. In fact, the people of Gaza were blamed for it. And by the way, even when they tried creative nonviolent resistance, as everyone lectures us on, we teach people nonviolence, by the way. When Palestinians tried nonviolence, the same people of Gaza, they were shot dead, hundreds died. A year, week after week, they would protest at the borders. No one talks about this. Everyone isolates October 7. Why isn't anybody outraged by the war crimes that are happening live on air day after day in Gaza? Hospitals, churches, mosques are being bombed. Food and medicine, it's denied. In fact, they told us they are going to do it. And they are doing it, and no one is protesting. The hypocrisy is appalling in this war. How in one context the world reacted, sanctions at Russia immediately. In the other context, Israel has the right to defend itself. It's shocking to us. And oh, by the way, do Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? It's a question we always ask. You know, some churches talked about Israel's sacred right to defend itself. And we ask ourselves, how is the colonizer defending itself from the colonizer? By the way, I don't support violence. We, especially in the Palestinian Christian community, fully stand behind creative nonviolent resistance. But why isn't anybody talking about Palestinians' right to defend themselves when their land is stolen, their narrative is stolen, their homes are stolen, and yet still they are blamed for it, and we're always called the aggressors? Why is one form of violence self-defense, yet the other terrorism? Who controls the language here? This is the kind of question that continue to outrage us as Palestinians. I look at the way people deal with the different sides of the equation here. The whole world was outraged by October 7th. And October 7th, of course, many horrific things happened on October 7th. I do not support the killing of children or kidnapping of children, but then, or families in their homes. But then everybody was outraged with the kidnapping of Israeli civilians. And I hope we all agree that kidnapping is wrong, especially kidnapping children, that it's wrong, it's evil, it must be condemned. I hope we all agree. Why isn't anybody talking about the Palestinians kidnapped? Since October 7th, 9,000 Palestinians have been kidnapped. Why isn't anybody talking about it? Kidnapped, tortured, starved, held without trial or charges or seeing a lawyer, raped. It's no longer allegations that they were raped. It's documented, it's proven. And the world is silent. I haven't seen the world waging war and talking about Palestine's sacred right to defend itself and rescue the hostages. Are we less human? Why isn't anybody talking about the Palestinian children kidnapped? Hundreds of children. Before October 7th, by the way, hundreds of children. And then many more after October 7th. And by the way, you know why. Because here is the power of empire. It can label people, control the discourse, and get away with it. By labeling those Palestinian children as terrorists, they can say we arrest them. It's self-defense. Israel defending its right to exist. And in doing so, they can justify even the arrest of children without trial. And you know what the problem is? The world lets them away with this. And we ask for how long as Palestine. So all of this is ignored. No one talks about it, it seems. And we continue to act. Does the international law matter, or are we less human to the extent that the international law and human rights do not apply on us? The double standard in all of this is appalling. To the extent that even after the ICJ ruled in a clear manner that Israel, it's very plausible that Israel is committing genocide, and called on Israel to change its course of action, no one did a thing, no one moved a finger to make the suffering of Palestinians less. And within days, friends, within a day or two of the ICJ ruling, which said it's plausible Israel is committing genocide, and no one doing a thing about it, Israel only alleged that 12 UNRWA members, out of thousands, 12 took part in the October 7th event, and 12 countries led by the United States immediately suspending funding to UNRWA. I mean, the amount of hypocrisy is appalling, and the level of racism behind this hypocrisy is so startling. Don't tell us it's not racism, because this war has proven to us that the world leaders don't see us as equal. My second point, and why I'm here, is to call out the American people, but particularly as a pastor, the American church, because the American church is complicit in all of this. We need to call it for what it is. Theology has always played a role in justifying and supporting the settler colonialism of Palestine. It was the pretext of the colonization of Palestine. We were told that Jews are returning to their home. I just mentioned the concept of a land without people. It's the slogan of the Zionist movement. Yet what very few people know is that Christian Zionists said this before Jewish Zionists. And by the way, Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism and outnumbers Jewish Zionism. We were told that the solution, and I'm here telling you what the Europeans said, to what they created, which is the Jewish problem, anti-Semitism and racism toward the Jews, was the restoration of Israel. For that to happen, Jews must be in Palestine. And that was the beginning of the idea, a land without people for a people without a land. For years, theology came to the aid of Israel. Using biblical language, we were told that Jews are returning to their land. How many times you've heard that slogan? And I hope you understand how that slogan is received by us Palestinians. The moment you say Jews are returning to their land, you make me, the indigenous Palestinian, the stranger in that land. As if I am occupying someone else's land and now that person is returning. When you say Jews return to their land, you give a Jew born in Brooklyn or in California more rights to come and live and dispossess me and live in that land because God says so. And you've been repeating this kind of line of thinking and theology year after year after year. By the way, when Palestinians say this is our land, when I say this is our land as a Palestinian, I'm not making a political statement. We're talking about land we've owned and farmed for generation upon generation upon generation upon generation. We're deeply rooted in Palestine. This is not about making political claims when we say this is our land. Yet somehow, we have to always hear this concept that God gave the land to the Jewish people. And I really hope people who repeat that line of thinking or promote it, whether in a soft way or in a hard way in churches. And by the way, Reverend Munther, a Palestinian theologian, calls this the software of empire. There is the hardware and there is the software, theology. And I always wish to tell people, I wish you're listening to yourself. For how can I have a conversation with someone if your part of the argument is, well, God said so, or God told me so? There's nothing to debate, really. Are you listening to yourself? Are you trying to understand what you're imposing on the Palestinian people? I thought you were all about freedom of religion. Yet you want to impose that religious belief not only on millions of Palestinians, but to make it the basis for political rights and ethnically cleansing Palestine. Are you listening to yourself? Show me one other conflict in the world in which the reference point to a dispute is a religious text and not the international law. Seriously. Show me one other context in which the reference point to a dispute is a religious text and not even human rights. And the sad irony for us Palestinians is that human rights are being abused using the very same religious texts that were supposed to protect our human rights. This is what's happening in Palestine. So I continue to tell those Christians, are you really listening to yourself what you are asking Palestinians to believe and to accept? Theology played a role in colonialism. Theology played a role to justify and support what's happening in Palestine for the last 76 years. And people still ask me, but Pastor, doesn't the Bible say so and so and so in this text? And I want to help people understand what they're asking me. Because rather than trying to answer the question, I want them to try to understand what in fact they are telling me. Because in reality, if you understand what Zionism is and what Zionism has practiced on the ground, you're asking me to accept the idea that God is a racist, violent God. And I would not accept that. That God is a God of supremacy. A God who favors people based on their nationality, ethnicity, or even DNA. You're telling me that the very same God revealed in Jesus, who was the embodiment of compassion, mercy, love, and justice, is a racist tribal God who wages wars. A God of genocide now? I cannot accept this. And I won't go to debate this, because I know who God is. And I'm shocked by what we hear, even from pastors in this country today. The idea of a God of a genocide. Some suggested that we turn Gaza into a parking lot. I'm talking about pastors. Some suggested using the example of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and get it over with quickly. It is a congressman who was a pastor. And I think, which Jesus are you reading? Where did you get this? Where is love in all of this thinking? And you know, the more I think about it, maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Yes, the Bible is weaponized, and it has been weaponized over history, unfortunately, to justify many forms of oppression. And maybe we should not be surprised that in a country with a history of settler colonialism and a history of using the religious text, the Bible, to justify settler colonialism, is supporting a settler colonial entity. We shouldn't be surprised because we've seen how people use the Bible, distorted the image of this is not the Bible, this is not Jesus. But sadly, the Bible was weaponized even to justify slavery and segregation. In South Africa, it was used to justify apartheid. I was in South Africa in May, and I've learned at the feet of the giant people of faith there. And I did meet and engage and speak in churches. I would go to a church, a big church thing, and they would tell me this is the pulpit from which the first sermon on apartheid was preached. I went to a seminary and they said this is where apartheid theology was written. And I couldn't help but think, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude apartheid supremacy? Really? In the same way, we ask as Palestinians, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude Christian Zionism? You know, someone once said, God created us in His own image, and since then, we have been returning the favor. I think this is what's happening. We reflect our own prejudice and supremacy in the character of God. And by the way, when I say that the church is complicit, it's not only Christian Zionism in its fundamentalist articulation. Because if this war taught us anything, it's that mainline, liberal, progressive Christianity is also complicit in this war. You know, and those circles is so common to point to the evangelicals as the problem. But in this war, the very same people who always criticize the militant nature of evangelical Christianity, as they tell us, they were silent. They did not say much. So if Christian Zionism promoted a God of war and supremacy, others reflected to us a God who does not care. Silence is complicity. And I say this and I mean this because if you are silent about a genocide that's happening in front of all the world to see for 10 months, then how can we take that? You're approving it. And if you're silent about other Christians using the Bible to justify it, you're also approving it. And that's why, as I told you, many of them said Israel has the right to defend itself. And as Christians in this country, I'll come to this in the end. If you're silent about how your money is funding this genocide, it's your tax money, then you're approving. And if you're silent when the elected leaders you elect to the Congress continue to give the political cover to this genocide, then you're also approving. Silence is complicity. Silence promoted to us or gave us the notion of a God who does not care. One of the sins of the church today, and by the way, it's not just the church, allow me to even say, if I may, of many, many people of faith all over the world, is that of apathy, indifference to suffering. We're so religious, we're so good at being religious, we're not good when it comes to those suffering from injustice at the front steps of our doors. We're not that good in caring for the oppressed and the marginalized. But we claim to be religious and worship a God of justice, mercy, and truth. It's an indictment against all people who claim to worship God, yet are silent about the suffering of others. In the biblical tradition, there is a parable that Jesus gave about the rich man and Lazarus. I'm sure many of you know that story. And it tells of two people. One is rich Doesn't mention his name. One is poor, very poor, Lazarus. And Jesus talks about how both died, one went to heaven, one went to hell. I've always asked myself, why did the rich man go to hell? Is it his money? Is this a call that if you're rich, you're going to hell? I don't know. But then, no, it's not that. It's a question I've asked, to be honest. And then I paid attention to a detail in the story that actually showed that it's not the richness that is the problem. It's something else. The Bible says Lazarus literally lied at the gate of the rich man. He was at his doorsteps, meaning that the rich man would see Lazarus every day going in and going out. The sin of that rich man was his apathy to injustice. He did not care for the poor. And as I said, it's an indictment against many religious people today. Suffering is literally at the doorsteps. And what's happening in Gaza today is being watched by all of us. And I ask, what are we doing? And sadly, when it comes to the mainline churches, let me be very clear in my criticism. I hope no one, if you're offended, it's okay. So many in those churches prefer comfort to justice. They want to avoid controversy. This is why they're not talking about Palestine, because it's controversial. And they don't want to spend, as they call it, they prefer not to speak rather than get into a serious discussion on justice. They prefer and they choose comfort. It's a church that wants to avoid controversy. And I always say, imagine if Jesus walked on earth trying to avoid controversy. I was in Minneapolis and I visited the George Floyd Square. I've learned, I've listened, and I was told how many times in the civil rights tradition, a similar thing happened when many white church leaders would say, we will not address this because we don't want to disturb the law and order. So they didn't address segregation. And in the same way today, churches fear the backlash. And you know what they do? They pray for peace. They send us their best wishes. And they don't call out war crimes that are happening in front of everyone. Silence is complicity. And the church has been complicit in many ways. As I say this, I cannot deny, and I would be wrong to deny, the many, many prophetic voices that have spoken. I'm grateful for churches, mosques, and synagogues that demonstrated in the streets, that made their voices heard. I don't deny that, and I definitely see it. And I want to encourage all of you, and thank you, if you have spoken out. I think of the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage, where thousands upon thousands walked all over the world, miles upon miles, calling for a ceasefire. I see that. But I think you also agree with me that by and large, faith leaders, and I will only focus on my own tradition, Christian church leaders, were silent. So my message for the church and for faith leaders today is precisely this. This is a Kairos moment. This is a divinely appointed moment, and it's a moment that demands action. It's a moment that demands courage, integrity, and response. We cannot go back to the old ways of responding to what's happening in Palestine. It's time to have discernment about what's happening and respond appropriately. It is a moment that I would like to call "You are the man" or "You are the person" moment. Inspired by Nathan's confrontation with King David, a biblical story from 1 Samuel. It happened when Nathan, the prophet, had to confront King David with David's sin of greed, adultery, murder, exploiting the vulnerable, and taking what is not his own. David did all of these in his sin. And Nathan had to confront him. To do so, Nathan gave a story with a clear message. And that story was followed with a strong conclusion. So let me read you how David confronted David. The Lord sent Nathan, how Nathan confronted David. The Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. So the rich man had very many flocks and herds. The poor man had nothing but one little lamb that he had bought. He brought it up, grew it up with him and with his children. The poor man the lamb used to eat of the poor man's meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. And then Nathan says, there came a traveler to the rich man. And the rich man was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer or the traveler he had come to him. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for that guest who had come to him. The Bible tells us that David was angry, greatly kindled against this man. He was shocked by that story. David said, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And then came Nathan's response. So profound, so courageous, so prophetic. A response that is so much needed today. Nathan said to David, you are the man. You are the man. This was Nathan's challenge to the empire of his time. It took courage, for sure. It took risk. But he had to speak truth to power. He had to uncover the exploitation of the vulnerable, even if it meant challenging his own king and his own empire. This was Nathan's Kairos moment in which he realized that diplomacy doesn't work. He realized that trying to make a vague statement and tried to give a hint to David that what he did is wrong does not work anymore. This was his Kairos moment that demanded prophetic courage, a moment that is very much needed today. Friends, this is not a time for diplomacy. It's time that we speak with moral clarity. It's time that we speak with integrity. This is not the time in which we try to rationalize the two positions and put them one next to the other and try to help people. We're peaceful, we see two sides of the equation. It's a Kairos moment that demands courage, integrity, and morality, moral clarity, especially today. Especially given what politicians are saying, are doing. And I say this having spent a lot of time, not just in the last 10 years, but throughout the years, meeting with church leaders, faith leaders, and also many diplomats and politicians. You know what they tell me? They say one thing behind closed doors and another in public. They tell me that they understand, they sympathize, they support, but they don't say this in public. Some of them would say, I wish I could say this in public. You know what? They can't say this in public, but they choose not to. And this is the problem. This is why I will continue to say what is needed more than anything in the political discourse today, and believe me, in the church discourse, is precisely that. Courage, integrity, and morality. So let's begin by confessing our complicity as people of faith. And this is why I'm here. Confessing demands repentance. Repentance means reverse of course. And let me suggest that repentance begins by calling things by name. Let's begin by that. Speaking truth to power means calling things by name, the way Nathan did, straightforward. As such, let's begin with this. Please stop talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There is no conflict in Palestine. There are no suicides fighting, and we're trying to mediate and reconcile. And please stop preaching to us or lecturing us on peace and reconciliation. There is no conflict. There is settler colonialism and apartheid in Palestine. And what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And maybe that's a problem, by the way. We've been trying to solve a conflict, when in fact it's not a conflict. And you know how hard it is? When someone is literally stepping with his boot on your throat and you're lecturing that person on the ground about peace and justice. Yes. It's not what you want to hear. So let's be clear, not just in our terms and language, but in our action. There is no conflict. So let's call things by name. And let's address and call Zionism and Christian Zionism for what it truly is. Zionism is supremacy. Zionism is racism, and even much, much more. And if you don't believe me, or you think I'm just being aggressive, listen to what Zionists are telling us. Have you read the nation-state law? I'm serious. Have you read? Go and read the nation-state law passed by the Israeli parliament, Knesset, just a few years ago. In it they say, and I quote, "The right for self-determination is exclusive to the Jewish people only." If this is not supremacy, what is? This is the parliament. This is the parliament of the prime minister who was celebrated at the Congress. And the current Israeli government that came to power in January of last year, which is a culmination of Israel's shift more and more to the right. In its coalition agreement, they say, and I quote, "Jews have an exclusive right to the land of Israel," end quote. And again, if this is not supremacy, what is? If this is not exclusion, what is? By the way, imagine if a Palestinian leader or if a Palestinian party said, Arab Muslims have exclusive right to the land of Palestine. Imagine how the world would react. It would be called anti-Semitic, all sorts of things. Yet Israel does it, and they get away with it. Yeah. So let's call Zionism for what it truly is. And I would like here to ask my Christian friends who support Zionism, given Zionism's history of colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid, can you really put the word Christian before all of that? No. Right. And for that matter, can we really put the word Jewish before that? I love the simplicity and moral clarity of Jewish Voice for Peace. In their website, in their manifesto, they say, and I quote, and just listen to the simplicity of it. Jewish Voice for Peace is guided by a vision of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. Yes. We unequivocally oppose Zionism because it is a counter to all these ideas. Straightforward. We stand for justice, equality, and freedom. Zionism is counter to all of these. We unequivocally oppose it. I wish Christians spoke with this clarity and courage, honestly. It's time to call Zionism for what it truly is. And as a Kairos moment, I would like to address faith leaders in this country. I'm very encouraged to begin with that wherever I went, I saw many Christian, Muslims, and Jews, people of faith and people of no faith even, coming together and saying no to apartheid, no to this genocide, bringing and creating new alliances for justice. It's really encouraging. I truly believe it is the way forward, and we need to see more of that. This is the kind of interfaith that will create the path for a better future. Not the typical, let's come and get to know one another and sing Kumbaya and leave. Let's come together to end injustice in our neighborhoods, but also in our world. Let's come together to say no to apartheid. This is the path forward. And I would like to precisely address faith leaders in this country, because you have a responsibility. Israel is doing what it's doing precisely because it can get away with it, yes, and precisely because it doesn't have to pay for it. Yes. This is the problem. And as long as Israel can know and rely on the fact that we will continue to receive political cover, UN resolution vetoes, for example, and financial cover for this. They're not paying for it. They will not stop. They will continue with their system of apartheid. So I repeat what I said to faith leaders today. It's your tax money. And if you're silent about the way your tax money is being spent, to send money for apartheid, for a genocide, then who will speak? If you are not speaking, then who will speak? And if faith leaders are not calling for accountability when war crimes are taking place in front of all to see, then who will speak if it's not faith leaders? It's time to hold those you elect accountable. Let them hear your voices. And I'm sorry to say, they continue to fool you, saying one thing in public: we're troubled by the amount of civilians killed in this war. The next day they send weapons and money to Israel. Next day. They need to hear your voices. They need to hear that you are not happy with the way they're acting. They need to be held accountable. Act with your votes. Act with your support. Act with your voices. Be present. Hold those you elect accountable. It is time faith leaders lead. This is a Kairos moment for the church. This is a Kairos moment for all people of faith and no faith. It is time to lead. Let me in conclusion say this. In December I said, and I repeat, Gaza has become the moral compass of our world. Gaza has divided our world, and it's actually a good thing. Because we need to know where you stand from the killing of 16,000 children. We need to know where you stand. Gaza has become the moral compass of our world, dividing it not on the basis of religion, ethnicity, or nationality, but on ethical and moral grounds. And friends, when it comes to Palestine, it's a very simple choice. You're either with justice or with apartheid. It's very simple. There is no third way. You can no longer claim to be in the middle and try to pray and join both sides together. There is an oppression happening in Palestine. Let's dismantle the structures of apartheid and injustice that exist right now in Palestine. Gaza has become the moral compass of our world, and it's our collective humanity that is at stake. For let me repeat. If the world is okay with the genocide that is happening under our watch, we're watching it. Children are being massacred in a horrific way. Day after day we see images of body parts, of people pulled from under the rubble. And if we're still okay with that, what kind of future are we giving to our children and grandchildren? It's our humanity that is at stake. It's not just simply about Gaza. And as a pastor, I must address my fellow Christian siblings. It's precisely the credibility of our Christian witness that is at stake. If we claim to follow Jesus of Nazareth, the embodiment of love and compassion, yet are silent about a genocide that is happening at our doorsteps, then it's our credibility that is at stake. If we're silent when the Bible is weaponized to justify this genocide, and we're not doing enough to stop it or to stop the weaponization of the Bible, then it's the credibility of our witness that is at stake. We can no longer be silent. And that's why I will continue to ask, where is the church when the church is needed? Why isn't the church in the streets? Why isn't the church speaking out in a louder voice? I've asked myself this question several times. And you know, when horrible things happen, we usually ask, where is God? Right? Why does God allow this? And maybe if it's an earthquake, yes, we can ask this question. If it's a hurricane, we can ask this question. But the genocide committed by fellow humans, the real question is, where are the good people to stop it? And as a Christian, I will continue to ask, where was the church? And it's the question that will continue to haunt us in our Christian tradition, given our history. I've learned this in a very difficult way. Some years ago, I was in my 20s and I visited the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. I'm not comparing suffering or context, I'm just telling you my experience. And in that visit, accompanied by a Jewish person who explained the history to me as I went from one room to the other, I was traumatized. And in my naivety, and I say this honestly, in my naivety, I kept asking myself, you know what, where was the church? Because I thought, surely the church will not accept this. How did they allow this to happen? Where was the church in Germany and Europe? I say in my naivety because I later studied history and discovered that the church was actually very much complicit in the Holocaust. The very same church that today lectures us on violence in Islam and Muslims, and I tell them, have you any shame? Study your history. Who slaughtered 6 million Jews? Was it Arabs and Muslims or the church? Or Christians, sorry. But that's the question we need to ask. Where was the church? The church, friends, must find its home in the streets. That's where the church belongs. The church belongs with those who are hungry and thirsty for justice. That is where the church belongs, with those who are hungry and thirsty for justice. I look at the students, their passion, their commitment. They understand what we've been preaching about, the concept of a costly solidarity. They put their futures at risk. They paid a heavy price. Some were sued for doing this. They sacrificed so much. And yes, we need to applaud them. Today, in this country, this is where moral integrity lies, with those students. And that's why I will continue to say, when people ask me, what about November, the elections, I say, I don't care about November. I care more about September. I have more hopes if those students will go back to the streets to demonstrate, to the sit-ins, to their encampments. And to faith leaders, I say, continue to go. Those of you who are going to those demonstrations, please continue to go. And if you're not going, encourage others to go. Please support them, defend them, encourage them, comfort them. We need to protect them. And we need to realize that many of them are actually traumatized, especially those with Palestinian descent. Where is the church to comfort them? Instead, in their pain and suffering, they are met with violence and accusations of anti-Semitism. We need to be with those who are struggling, who are thirsty and hungry for justice. And let me remind you of a very important principle in Scripture, that we will be judged based on this. We will all give account to God for our words and actions. By the way, I know that in our Christian tradition we don't like to talk much about the judgment of God. We're too kind, I think. We're too nice. We don't talk about the judgment day. However, Jesus talked so much about judgment day, more than we like. And in one particular passage in Matthew 25, a passage that has guided me and challenged me and comforted me throughout these last 10 months, Jesus talks about the concept of the judgment of God. And he says, we will be judged, as humans, we will be judged on the basis of how we treated the least of these. The least of these are those who are hungry, those who are thirsty, those who are strangers, those who were without clothes, and those who were in prison. Let me make it easier. The least of these are the victims of our systems of injustice and oppression. And Jesus said, we will be judged based on how we treated the least of these. I wish Christians take this passage more seriously. I wish we take this passage literally. You don't always find me talking about taking the Bible literally. But in this instance, I think you should. I think we all should. We need to take these words of Jesus seriously. And not only that, Jesus even goes as much as to say, not only how you treated the least of these, but on whether we saw the image of Jesus in each one of those. For Jesus said, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. And this was the basis for which, and this was mainly, or one of the main reasons why in Christmas, when we could not celebrate Christmas in the midst of a genocide, we created the manger of Jesus under the rubble. Because in a time when the whole world was defending, justifying, and explaining and rationalizing the killing of the children of Gaza, we insisted we see the image of Jesus in every child killed and pulled from under the rubble. We were tired. We were tired and honestly very angry by the systematic dehumanization of the people of Gaza and even the children of Gaza, to the extent that people were okay with the constant killing of children and the images day after day of children pulled from under the rubble. That's why we say we see Jesus in them. Christ is under the rubble. This is God's message to us, that He is in solidarity with those marginalized and oppressed and those who are suffering. This is the meaning of Christmas and the Incarnation. God becoming one of us in our pain and suffering and trauma, as if to say, I am with you, I am one of you. This is God's solidarity with the oppressed and the marginalized. Christ is under the rubble. And friends, let me say it like this. God's solidarity must become our solidarity. If God is in solidarity with those who are marginalized and oppressed, if God takes sides with those who are suffering from injustice, so should we as well. This is our call to action. We are called to act. We are called for costly solidarity. We are called to see the image of Jesus in those who are marginalized and oppressed, pulled from under the rubble. Rise and act. Do it for the sake of our faith. Do it for the sake of the people of Gaza. So with one voice we say, ceasefire now, end apartheid now, and may justice reign, and righteousness fill the world, like waters fill the seas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Munther. Before we have some questions and answers, or we're thinking maybe 15 or 20 minutes of Q&A, I'll just say a few words. There are some friends here today who have some specific activities and actions that you can, think about whether you want to participate in. We've got Nora Curry here. She just returned from Palestine with International Solidarity Movement. And if you think you might like to join and learn about the International Solidarity Movement, which goes to Palestine and which does nonviolent peaceful activity to oppose the genocide and the occupation, then see Nora. Nora, can you stand up so people can see you? Yeah. And right now we're going to pass around some donation baskets, and we're fundraising tonight for the tour of Reverend Munther. It costs a lot of money to travel all around the country, and if you support his message, I encourage you to make a donation to that. The Peace Center is paying all the costs for renting the space tonight and hosting this affair. So all of those donations that you give will be going to the Prince of Seville, North America. Another specific action, some of you saw, I've seen some beautiful t-shirts, the apartheid-free communities. And that's an excellent campaign. And there's information outside in the area that we began. And we've also got a petition. And I'll just read a few words. I'll take a minute or a minute and a half and read some things. Read the key parts of it. It's a bit long, but I'll read the key parts of it, and that way you'll know if you want to sign up on your way out. It's the petition, and where you sign is at the table that a lot of you signed on your way in. And this is the People's Resolution calling for a ceasefire in Palestine and Israel and demanding justice for all. We, the undersigned residents of Contra Costa and surrounding counties living on the stolen land of the Miwok and Ohlone peoples, believe that all life is precious and that all suffering and loss of life is tragic. We mourn the lives lost on and since October 7, 2023, due to the violence in Israel and Palestine. As well, we also mourn the lives lost in the nearly 100 years leading up to that day. We recognize the current crisis takes place within a long history of occupation and Zionist colonization in historic Palestine. Many of us who are Jewish reject the notion that an apartheid ethno-state on stolen land will make us safe from anti-Semitism. We, the people of Contra Costa and surrounding counties, join the United Nations, Human Rights Organization, world leaders, religious leaders, the city of Richmond, and citizens of the world everywhere in calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Therefore, we call on all city and county governments in Contra Costa County and around the country to heed the demands of their constituents and join with them in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire. These calls for a ceasefire must be backed by concrete and meaningful actions to pressure Israel and the U.S. government, such as divestment from Israel and from weapons manufacturers and companies profiting from the suffering of Palestinians and all oppressed peoples around the world. We demand our tax dollars be used to strengthen and support our communities rather than funding endless war abroad. As citizens of the world, we demand peace, liberation, and freedom for all. So that is the the People's Resolution, and we've got sign-up sheets on your way out if you want to sign it, and those are the key points of it. So we've got, are the baskets going around for donations? Then I'll pass around. We've got a microphone. We do ask for people not to make lengthy statements. We all came here tonight to hear Reverend Munther, and I'll pass the mic alternating from one side to the other, and we'll have Reverend Munther respond to your questions for about 15 minutes. Yeah. First question?
Thank you for sharing. I had a question about the best way to financially support Palestinians, I guess, and then specifically in Gaza. If you had any tips on that or suggestions?
Money.
Oh, shall I answer now? Okay. Thank you. If you talk to me afterwards, I'll give you some suggestions for organizations I work directly with. It's so hard to get anything into Gaza right now. Israel is still blocking anything, so it's equally important that we put pressure on, even legislations here to allow food and aid to enter into Gaza. I'm particularly, although I have nothing personal, support and encourage supporting UNRWA, given that your government decided not to support them, and I think it sends a statement to the American government that if you are not going to give the money to UNRWA, we the people will give the money to UNRWA, given that they are really doing an amazing work, like many others in Gaza. But the ones I'm involved with, small charities that give and have work in Gaza, especially with the two churches there, I'm more than happy to share information with you.
Hi, Reverend. First of all, thank you so much for being here and
for coming on this tour. My question for you is, it's been coming up to a year now of what's happening in Gaza. What's the best way we as people who live in America can continue to advocate or support Palestinians? Or sometimes it feels, you know, a little bit hopeless since it's been so long. So what's your opinion? What's the best thing we can do, or what should we be doing?
Well, I can answer, but please remember I'm not American, so I don't really know the context as much as you know it. But here's what I can say. First, it needs to be a collaborative work. It needs to be interfaith, even with those with no faith. It needs to be a joint work in which everyone comes together, and it needs to begin with the bottom up. Grassroots needs to be stronger and mobilized in a better way. I feel many times we're good at protesting, we're not good at really doing the constructive work. And second, when it comes to this country, it's clear to me that a main way forward has to do with standing in front and confronting and challenging the work of AIPAC. In the last few months alone, AIPAC invested millions of dollars, millions, in primary races in the Democratic Party, and managed to defeat both, I think, Kerry Bush and Jamal Baldwin. Shame, yes, but if we are not willing to stand behind those congressmen and women who are willing to speak for justice and defend them, support them, give them financial need, then who will? So it's time also to organize and work in a more efficient way. It's important to demonstrate in the streets, I believe it. It's important to demand, but at the same time it's also important to vote in the same way, in a responsible way, to vote and to also defend and protect and support those politicians who are standing for Palestine. So maybe, I hope this helps.
Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum. So you talked about the Christian complicity. I'm a Muslim, but also there's a ton of Muslim complicity as well. I mean, the Muslim leaders around the world did what they could and should have. I think it might be a little different. So I guess my question to you is, are you also open to, I mean, the speech here was absolute, I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. I think a lot of our Muslim communities within our mosque should also hear this. So if we could have, maybe we will talk to our Muslim leaders and see if you might actually bring you to, you know, spread the word to some of the mosques. And then second thing you mentioned about the AIPAC, I think if we can do one thing and one thing only is to defeat AIPAC. AIPAC is the poison. So if there's an antidote as the root cause, it is to somehow neutralize the poison that is spread by AIPAC, not only to our politicians, but to the grassroots as well.
Thank you. Thank you. The Arab world was beginning to talk even about Islamic Zionism now, to be honest. And it's no secret that Palestinians feel betrayed by Arab and Muslim countries. And by the way, it began with the normalization of relationship with Israel by United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. You know, because that was normalizing apartheid. So I agree with you. And maybe the main reason I don't call out Muslim and Jewish and other faith traditions is it's usually not my habit to speak to other faith traditions. I'm more concerned with my own tribe, because it's hypocritical of me to call out others while not calling mine. So I do my work with my own community as much as I can. Having said that, I'm very honored, to be honest, and encouraged by the big number of leaders from the Muslim community who reach out to me and who support and listen to my talks and endorse them and circulate them. In Pittsburgh, I spoke in a mosque. In South Africa, I spoke in a mosque. In Palestine, of course, we live together. Whatever, in other words, yes, I know that many need to hear this message from different faith traditions, but I like not to, as Jesus said, not to see the log in others and not see what's in our own eyes. So I begin with my own community, saying that there is much work that needs to happen there. And yes, we need to continue. I think it's important to talk about, because AIPAC is not just a conspiracy theory. What shocks me is that everyone knows about what they're doing. And it's funny that you call it a democracy, given that the candidate with more money always wins. It's sorry to say, it's on you if you continue to allow it to happen, given how clear and obvious it is. Friends, you have another country interfering in your elections directly, openly, controlling who wins elections. And if you're okay with it, then that's a problem. So it's really time to call out AIPAC.